Settle back. Let the chair or bed hold you. Breathe slowly once, then again, letting the day's small weights fall away. Tonight we will rest with a story that has walked softly through many nights and countless hearts. The life of Jesus, told by 4 witnesses whose words have cradled weary souls for centuries. 4 Gospels, 1 gentle path, a promise born, a teaching given, compassion poured out, and a hope that will not be undone. Let these words be a soft light on your last waking thoughts. Imagine the Gospels as 4 lamps, each shaped a little differently. Each lamp casts its own warmth. One shows us a king who speaks of a kingdom within reach. Another moves with quick compassion, hands touching sores and storms. One tells parables that bend toward mercy and the table where the outcast is invited. The last speaks in intimate I am sayings, naming bread and light and life. We will walk beneath each light in turn, listening, allowing the rhythm of the story to slow us, to steady our breath. Before we step into the first gospel, a small invitation. If one of these 4 has already brought you comfort, or if a particular gospel has been like a lamp in your own dark hours, share which one comforts you most in the comments. For now, let your eyes soften, and let the words come close. In Matthew, the story opens like a long, faithful line drawn through time, a history carried to a single doorway. That arrival is quiet and holy. Picture a small town at night, the air cool and close. A woman gives birth. The place is a manger, humble and still. Above, a strange star keeps watch, steady and sure. Far off, some travelers see that light and take their gifts. Gold for a king, frankincense for the sacred, myrrh for what is fragile and finite. In this scene, the gospel names a promise fulfilled. The child is called Emmanuel, God with us, an assurance that the life before us will be one of presence. Not long after, danger makes its thin, sharp edges around that newborn life. A dream telling them to flee, a night road to Egypt, the hush of a family's exile, and then a quiet return to the slow rhythms of Nazareth. These early motions are not grand spectacle in this gospel. They are careful steps, a protection wrapped in obedience, a sense that even in the small, God keeps company. As Jesus grows, Matthew is attentive to identity. He records the voice that came at the river, a tender declaration that names him beloved. He points to a life marked by teaching, words given as though pressed into the listener's palm, simple, demanding, full of invitation. One afternoon on a gentle hillside, a crowd gathers and he sits among them, not as a lecturer above them but as a teacher who leans in. There he speaks with a hush that calls to the heart. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Hear those words slowly, like steps taken into a soft room. They are not promises of an easy life, but they are a map of a way that turns sorrow into comfort, meekness into surprising inheritance, hunger into filling, and the work of peacemaking into family. They are the pulse of a kingdom that looks faintly different from the kingdoms of force and show. It values the small, the gentle, the forgiving. He goes on with images that rest like parables in the mind. He says that his followers are the salt of the earth, seasoning that preserves what is good and gives flavor to what otherwise might be bland. He calls them the light of the world, a lamp set on a stand not to be hidden, but to warm others, to make the paths visible at night. Listen to the cadence. An ordinary thing, salt light turned into a sacred calling. The metaphors are small and household easy, and yet they reach deep. Matthew tells parables about the kingdom as though it begins in places you would not expect, like a seed cast on uncertain ground. Consider the sower who scatters seed. Some falls on the path and is taken, some onto rocky soil where roots wither, some among thorns where growth is choked, and some into rich earth where it sprouts and yields a harvest beyond measure. The story does not avoid the truth of loss, all four kinds appear, but it holds with quiet attention that where seed finds good soil, abundance comes. The kingdom often begins in the small, the unseen. It grows by a mystery of ground and care. Another image. The tiniest seed, hardly noticed, becomes a great plant that shelters the birds. It is the mustard seed, so small at first and then expansive, an assurance that beginnings do not measure the size of what will be. The kingdom's growth is slow in ordinary sight, yet vast in outcome. Teaching and stories in Matthew are threaded with practical tenderness. He speaks of loving enemies, of praying in private rather than performance, of giving not for applause but with open hands. There is a moral seriousness here, an invitation to a righteousness that is not a ledger of rules but a heart turned toward God and neighbor. When Jesus speaks, he does so with a voice that invites a different kind of living. Generous, not grasping, visible, not vainglorious. The gospel also follows action. Healing the sick, calling the outcast, opening sight to those long held in darkness. In Matthew, the miracles often illuminate the teaching. The hand that touches a leper shows what mercy looks like up close. Feeding hungry crowds shows that the kingdom cares for the body's needs as well as the spirit's. These acts are not dramatic for their own sake. They are manifestations of a tenderness that refuses to let suffering pass by unnoticed. There is a particular tenderness in how children are spoken of. When little ones are brought near, he bends or welcomes in a way that names their worth. The realm he describes listens for the small voices. Matthew records that disciples are called not first for privilege but for following. Near a lake's edge, by the sound of nets, with a summons to leave the old work and learn a new trust. Discipleship here is an unfolding apprenticeship. Follow, listen, learn to live by the kingdom's logic. As Matthew traces the life forward, opposition grows around the one who speaks such things. Religious leaders ask questions. The streets hum with rumors both kind and hostile. The teacher's words cut through comfortable habits. They expose pretense and call for integrity. Still, he continues to give parables, pictures that invite a listener to discover. Some people lean in, and some do not. This gospel does not hide the cost of sincerity. To follow is to risk misunderstanding, to face loss, to be willing to stand as salt and light when the world prefers something else. As the story moves toward its hardest hours, Matthew keeps the narrative steady and sober. There is a night garden where the teacher prays with such intensity that his sweat feels like drops of grief. He asks for another path if it might be, yet he yields to the will that holds the larger story together. A trust formed not in indifference but through the depth of love and purpose. A friend will betray with a kiss, and the court of power will convene. The crowd's shouts will be a harsh wind against a fragile frame. The cross will be raised. Matthew tells these things with a reverence that does not seek to dramatize suffering, but to name its reality, the cost that was borne in human flesh. Even in that sorrow, Matthew lets the reader know that the story's thread does not end in darkness. After the burial, the earth holds its quiet. On the third day, there will be a turning. Women who come with grief find an empty place, and an angel's quiet word. The tomb is open. The fear that had held the heart loosens. He is not here, the messenger says. And in that announcement is the first soft dawn of hope. Later, the risen teacher will meet his friends, speak peace into their startled hearts, and give them a simple, lasting commission. To go, to teach, to baptize, to remember that he is with them always. That closing instruction is not a burden but a restful purpose, to carry forward the presence they have known. Matthew's voice is, above all, the voice of a teacher who understands that the kingdom comes in instruction, and in word, in parable, and in practice. It is a gospel that binds promise to lineage and then loosens the heart toward the poor, the merciful, the peacemakers. Its final words are both command and comfort. Go into the world carrying what you have received, and know that this presence remains with you. As the tale of Matthew settles, imagine leaving that hillside, its beatitudes and its small seeds, and moving now where action quickens, where mercy meets need with immediate hands. So the teacher speaks. Now see the servant move. The next witness will bring stories told in quicker steps, miracles that press close to the body's need, and a tenderness that acts with speed. Allow your breathing to match the calm you carry now, and follow gently as the story shifts its light. Now listen as the pace softens into the next witness, one who tells of movement, of hands that move quickly to meet need, of a tenderness that arrives without fanfare. In Mark, the story opens not with a long genealogy but with a voice at the river, a name spoken over water, the descent of a dove and the feeling that something tender and authoritative has begun. Jesus steps from the water, named and known, and the Spirit seems to settle as a quiet assurance rather than a triumphal flourish. He is led into the desert, a short, stark season where the wilderness tests the heart. There he meets temptation, and his steadiness is not a show of power but a measured refusal, a quiet fidelity that makes him ready to move. Mark's scenes give us swift close-up moments, an arrival into a village, a hand reaching out, the immediate relief on a face that has known pain. Picture the lakeshore where people press in, each carrying a need that the teacher meets with a touch or a word. A leper approaches, skin raw with exclusion. Where others step back, he steps forward. Compassion makes him touch what the world had declared unclean. Compassion refuses the easy separation. The leper's healing is not spectacle for spectacle's sake. It is restoration of a life from margin to belonging. There is the day when a small boat rides the uncertain belly of a storm. The sky presses dark, and the wind makes a voice of its own. Inside, Jesus sleeps with a calm that is not uncaring but concentrated, trust embodied. The frightened friends wake him with fear. His response is brief, authoritative, and gentle. A word, and the storm eases as if recollected by a father who calls a household back to peace. The water settles. The people are left with wonder, and the slow, comforting realization that the one who sleeps can stir the seas. The miracle is both rescue and lesson. Faith is often not loud. It is the quiet trust that stills the inner turmoil. Mark shows miracles as a seam of mercy running through action. Once a crowd gathers hungry and scattered. He takes small provisions, 5 loaves, 2 fish, lifts a blessing, and begins passing them out. Hands trade food in a slow rhythm, and the need is met beyond expectation. The act speaks plainly. Tenderness attends to the body's hunger. Later, in the shadowed hour of night, he walks on the water toward the struggling friends. Fear meets him. He speaks steadiness. Take heart. It is I. The night becomes a place where presence dispels dread. Mark also brings forth stories of faith from unexpected quarters. A Roman centurion, an outsider in many regards, speaks with a confession of faith so simple and sure that the teacher marvels. He says from a distance with humility and trust, "Just say the word," and the servant is made well. The scene holds a quiet lesson. Faith is often a straightforward trust that does not demand spectacle. It believes in the power of a word. The centurion's faith is not loud praise but a soft confidence that allows healing to come near. In other moments, the immediacy of Mark's telling sharpens the tenderness of touch. A hemorrhaging woman, hidden under shame and fear, reaches out and touches the hem of his garment in a crowded place. Her act is small and furtive, and yet it meets grace. He feels the touch, notices, and names it, not to accuse but to restore. She is acknowledged. She is given back dignity and peace. Mark preserves these small personal encounters like moments of quiet rescue, each one a hand lifted into life. Where the world moves rapidly, Mark keeps a rhythm of short scenes that nevertheless invite us to linger. He records a string of healings, cleansings, restorations, each one a small lesson in what mercy does when it meets human need. The finger of Jesus writes a different kind of justice. Not retort, but relief. Not condemnation, but mending. The crowds come to see, to ask, and to taste a kindness that wants to be more than momentary sympathy. Toward the close of Mark's telling, the scenes tighten. The same hands that healed touch betrayal. A friend will lead soldiers with a kiss, a sign remembered among companions. The teacher stands before authorities who measure him by their own rules, and the crowd sways between accusations and pity. Mark does not dramatize for effect. He narrates the hard truth that the path toward restoration required a pass through suffering. There is solitude in a garden, a prayer that reaches for another possibility, and yet a yield toward the larger will that threads purpose through pain. On a hill outside the city walls, a cross is raised. The scene is stark but not sensational. The voice of Mark lets us honor the weight of what happened, the shouts, the quiet of the noon, the feeling of abandonment that can come when good things meet anger. The crucifixion is told with pastoral restraint, sorrow acknowledged, mystery held. The burial comes, and the heavy stones fall across the tomb, sealing a silence that feels like the world's deepest yes to grief. But Mark too gives us a dawn. The women who had loved him come at first light to the tomb, carrying their spices and their grief. They find the stone rolled away and a young man sitting quietly where death had seemed to have the last word. "You seek Jesus of Nazareth," he says softly. "He has been raised. He is going before you." The message is a careful, loving instruction, not to let fear be final. There is confusion, a trembling that feels like the first breath after a long sob. The story closes on an invitation, go and tell. The resurrection in Mark is an urgent whisper. Go, remember, carry this presence into the lives of others. Pause with that image of swift mercy becoming an urgent whisper, and let your breath return to evenness. We leave Mark's quick compassion and move now to another voice, one that lingers like warm light around a table, that loves stories that turn on mercy and invitation. In Luke, the narrative stretches into small domestic details and the tenderness of lowly people whose names matter. Luke begins with a birth told in luminous detail. Picture the hills outside Bethlehem, the hush of night air, and shepherds tending flocks under stars. Unlike soldiers or princes, these shepherds are the first to hear, angels breaking into the dark with a message of peace. Glory to God in the highest, they say, and then a quiet promise. Good news for all people. The message goes first to the simple and the watchful, as if God chooses to tilt the world toward those who keep faithful watch in ordinary nights. Luke lingered on the smallness of the manger, swaddling cloths, the smell of straw, a mother's gentle gaze, scenes that allow tenderness to take root. News travels across the hills to people who do not have titles, and they carry it with a quick, trusting joy. The story Luke tells is fond of names: Simeon, who waits with prophetic hope; Anna, who worships with a life of patience; shepherds who return praising God. The light falls on the margins, and mercy moves like a soft current into the lives of those who had not expected it. Luke gives two parables that hold long in the mind because they turn the world on its head by insisting on mercy. Imagine the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, a path known to be dangerous. A traveler is beaten and left for dead. Passers-by, religious leaders who should know compassion, walk by on the other side. Then a Samaritan, one whom the traveler's society would have scorned, stops. He tends wounds, lifts the wounded into his own animal, carries him to an inn, and pays for care. The resolution is simple. Mercy is the true neighbor. The story asks gently, who showed love? And the listener feels the question move inward. Mercy demands active care, not just feeling but repair. Another parable sits quiet and resonant. The son who left with his share of an inheritance, who squandered it in empty pleasures, and found himself feeding pigs with hunger in a foreign land. The prodigal son reaches the bottom and remembers a father's house. He rehearses his apology, preparing to be a hired servant rather than a son. But the father sees him from a distance, runs with a love that is both tender and scandalous in its eagerness, wraps him in a robe, puts a ring on his finger, and calls for a feast. The elder brother, faithful and wounded by perceived injustice, stands outside the celebration. The parable does not erase the pain of the elder son, but it insists that grace celebrates return, and that mercy rejoices over recovery. The image lingers like warm bread broken at a table where all belong. Luke loves table scenes. Jesus much prefers the company of ordinary and outcast people sitting at tables. Simple meals become sites of transformation. There is laughter and argument, invitation and scandal, because the very act of eating together repairs divisions. He welcomes tax collectors and sinners. He sits with them, listens, and transforms isolation into family. Each meal becomes a small kingdom moment. The poor are invited, the hungry are remembered, and the burden of shame is eased by shared bread. Luke also keeps many tender healing stories. A woman bent over for years feels the touch that straightens her spine. A father sees a child restored from death to life and receives his breath back as a renewed trust. Luke is intent on inclusion. Women who follow, men who repent, the outcast who is brought back into the circle. In these stories, restoration is not merely physical, it is the reopening of doors that had been closed by society. As Luke's narrative moves toward Jerusalem, Jesus tells of prayer and persistence, of trusting God as a parent trusts. He turns the heart toward the kingdom again and again with parables that stick like seeds, stories that transform the imagination more than they legislate an easy answer. There is an intentional tenderness. God is patient, God returns, and the realm is open to those who turn their faces back. The Passion in Luke is presented with a steady sorrow and a clear eye for human complexity. In the garden, Jesus prays with anguish and acceptance. His friends are tired and fall asleep. He is arrested with a mix of confusion and pain. At his trial, the claims against him feel thin against the weight of what is happening. Yet even then, Luke notes, there is forgiveness. On the cross, Jesus prays, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." The line is both a plea for mercy for his persecutors and a luminous example of compassion in the face of suffering. The crucifixion is heavy with sorrow, but the narrative refuses to collapse into despair. The story shows that love can look like endurance, that suffering can be met with words of forgiveness that widen the possibility of healing. When the tomb is visited at dawn, Luke gives us the sight of two men in dazzling clothing who remind the women of the promise, that he had told them of rising again. The message is careful and urgent. Remember what was said, and let hope reframe the grief. Jesus appears on a road to two companions who had been downcast. They do not recognize him until at a table when he breaks bread. The recognition is slow, tender, like the return of clear sight. He tells them to remember and to stay with a mission that will bring joy, that repentance and forgiveness will be declared in his name to all nations. Luke ends with the sense of a story that continues through ordinary lives. People who were changed go out into the world to witness, to restore, to feed what is broken. His closing is like the soft insistence of a hearth fire. Keep going. There is work to do, but it is work that brings life. From the table's warmth, we move now toward the last gospel, which speaks with a quieter, deeper voice about identity and intimacy. John opens differently. His first sentence reaches back to the earliest language of all. In the beginning was the Word. Those words sit like a gentle drum in the mind, reminding us that this story is larger than a lifetime. It is woven into the making of the world itself. The Word was with God. The Word was God. From that depths of being, life and light emerge, and the life shines in the darkness in a way that darkness cannot overcome. John's Gospel invites listeners into close conversations. It is fond of the intimate phrase, "I am," simple words that name what Jesus gives. "I am the bread of life," he says, offering his presence as nourishment. "I am the light of the world," he tells those stumbling in shadow. "I am the resurrection and the life," he promises those who face the wound of death. Each "I am" is not an abstract doctrine, but an offer of closeness, a naming of how the presence works in ordinary need. These sayings sit like lamps in the night, brief, steady, generous. John gives us moments of tender friendship that feel like the hush after a long day. There is the story of Lazarus, a brother loved by friends and by Jesus himself. When Lazarus dies, the sisters Martha and Mary lament loudly. They are both honest in grief and honest in faith. Martha comes with an argument of belief. She declares that she trusts Jesus even now. Mary weeps at the feet of sorrow. Jesus weeps, sharing in their sorrow, a God who enters grief rather than standing apart from it. Then he calls, not from a distance but with an intention that gathers everyone into a moment of astonishment. "Lazarus, come out." The dead man comes, bound in linen. Life returns as a quiet miracle of presence, one that leaves people stunned and many hearts turning toward belief. John also holds private conversations that feel like confidences. Nicodemus comes at night to ask about new birth, and the teacher speaks of being born from above, of the Spirit's quiet work within. A woman at a well, worn by life's demands and stubbornly honest, meets him and finds that the living water he offers can quench thirst in ways she had not known to name. In these scenes, salvation is not only cosmic, but personal. It meets each life in its particular need. At the cross in John's telling, tenderness and intimacy continue to surface. Jesus speaks plainly to those around him. He ensures that a loved one will be cared for, entrusting Mary and the beloved disciple to one another as family. Even in suffering, he maintains connection. Later, when the tomb is found empty, Mary stands weeping and mistakes the risen one for the gardener until he speaks her name. The moment of recognition is soft, intimate, and restorative. "Mary," he says. She answers with a name that returns both familiarity and worship. John collects resurrection appearances that feel like slow recoveries of relationship. He shares with the disciples a breakfast on the shore, bread over a charcoal fire, fish warmed again. The friend who had doubted restored and invited to feed the sheep. The Great Commission in John's voice is not simply a command. It is an invitation to continue loving, to act in tenderness and to remain present with one another as the world goes on. John 17, the prayer that Jesus offers, reads like a farewell that holds everyone in its arms. He prays for his friends to be kept in truth, to be united, and to share in the love that has held him. The plea for oneness is not about erasing difference, but about togetherness in the purposes of mercy and peace. Select lines from that prayer feel like a lullaby for community, that they may be one, as you and I are one, that they may have my joy fulfilled within them. The prayer is not a theological lecture but a quiet request for protection, unity, and abiding peace. Now, after the four witnesses have each placed their lamp on the table, the teacher who instructs, the servant who moves swiftly, the storyteller of mercy, the friend who names God with intimate words, let us draw these scenes together with a gentle hand. Each gospel carries its own accent, and yet together, they shape a path from cradle to empty tomb that brings rest to the weary heart, by reminding us of presence, mercy, and hope. Think again of the manger, small and warm, where a child is welcomed into a fragile world. Think of the hands that touch the sick, of the seashore where sleep and storm meet, of tables where all are invited. Think of the I am statements that name the kind of life offered, bread that satisfies beyond appetite, light that gently unseats despair, resurrection that rearranges hopelessness into a promise of life. Perhaps your own night carries a lingering weight, loss that will not quiet, worry that returns like a tide. Let these stories operate like steady anchors rather than quick fixes. They do not erase pain. They offer presence. They name that sorrow is seen, that suffering is met with words of forgiveness, that the smallest kindness has the power to restore what was thought lost. In the telling, compassion becomes a pattern to which we can tether our own fragile hearts. As we approach the passion and resurrection together, we do so with a slow and sober tenderness. The path to the cross is not a romantic drama, but the honest confrontation between love and brokenness. Gethsemane records a prayer given in sorrow. The arrest marks the betrayal that often looks ordinary, a familiar face, a kiss, an agreement of convenience. Trials are thin, sharp, judges' robes and crowds merging into a momentum that is hard to stop. Yet throughout, the presence of Jesus is a steadying current. He answers with few words, yet each word holds weight. There is no theatrical fury. There is quiet resolve and the teaching that love sometimes walks through suffering in order to open a new way for others. On the hill, nails meet wood and the human heart feels the deepest pangs of abandonment and grief. But even there, words of care come, promises to a repentant companion, concern for a loved one, a final cry that gathers the meaning of a life. These moments are not easy to sit with, and the gospel narrators do not ask you to look away. Instead, they ask that you see how love can bear the weight of pain, and how a grave is met not with defeat, but with the seed of new life. At dawn, the tomb is found empty by women who had known loss and love both. The news is not a blare but a soft proclamation. He is not here. The emptiness of the tomb becomes the fullness of a promise. The risen one appears to friends and to those who had gone searching. He speaks peace into startled hearts. The resurrection is, finally, both proof and invitation. Proof that the story of presence did not end on a hill, and invitation to live in the light of that truth. Rest in that final assurance for a moment. The story that began in a manger and was sealed by a grave opens again into a living path. The lives of simple people, shepherds, fishermen, women who tend and weep and hope, are the ones that carry this witness forward. The mission given at the end of Matthew, the urgent whisper at the close of Mark, the table invitation closing of Luke, and John's intimate farewell together, press us not to a burdensome task, but to a quiet, steady continuation. Live as people who have been met by presence. Extend tenderness. Forgive and be forgiven. Keep watch for the light. If you feel your thoughts drifting to unrest, bring them back to a single small posture, breathing, noticing, and remembering. Breathe in the image of a lamp set on a stand, its light deliberate and calm. Breathe out a thought that does not serve you tonight, an apology you can make in the morning, a worry you can visit at daylight. Let the gospel stories handle large questions for now. For tonight, receive their simplicity. You are seen, you are known, you are invited to rest. And because our time together has been held with gentle attentiveness, a small invitation. When you awaken from this rest, if one of these 4 gospels has been a steady lamp for your life, consider sharing which one comforts you most in the comments. Your quiet testimony may be the very lamp another tired soul needs. Before we close, let the most important images return once more in a soft and steady rhythm. Picture again the manger, warm, humble, watched by a star. Picture the hands that touch lepers and palms that press bread into waiting hands. Picture the storm stilled by a single calm word. The hike of a prodigal son returned to the house of a waiting father. The centurion's faith spoken simply. The friend who weeps at a tomb and hears his name called into life. These images are not abstractions. They are invitations to let presence enter the smallest places of your night. As your body settles and your breath finds longer spaces between its rises and falls, let the narrative's last scenes pour a gentle balm into the heart. The cross is heavy and true, but the tomb is open, and the voice that speaks peace is with you now. Rest does not mean forgetting. Rest means abiding in a presence that remembers and that transforms. A brief benediction now, spoken like a quiet prayer. Lord, keep watch over the hearts that have listened tonight. Let your presence be a steady lamp in the dark. Grant rest to the weary, mercy to the regretful, and the quiet hope that wakes us with purpose. May your peace settle over us as a gentle sleep and rise within us as morning courage. Amen. If these words have helped you unwind, subscribe for more peaceful readings of Scripture. Rest well. Peace be with you.